Good morning. Welcome to our latest seminar on clean transportation in India. My name is Joe Schultz. I'm the Communications Director for the ICCT. In a moment, I'll introduce Anup Bandavadekar, who will introduce our presenter, Mr. Iyer. But a few housekeeping details before we go forward. Most of you, I'm sure, have been to these webinars before, so this will be old news to most of you, but for those who haven't, what we plan to do this morning or this evening, or wherever you happen to be, is that we will run through the presentation first, the entire presentation. We'll take questions afterward. That helps us, among other things, keep the audio in good shape for the presentation. If you have questions during the presentation and you just something that you'd like clarified, you can use the chat pane or the question pane in your control panel. Francisco Posada Sanchez, one of our staff here at the ICCT, will be monitoring that. He may be able to respond in real time to your questions. Afterward, we'll have the presentation will take about a half an hour, we anticipate, and afterward there will be about a half an hour for questions. If you have a question that you would like to ask via the audio, please just raise your hand, and one of the organizers, excuse me, one of the organizers will be able to call on you and unmute you. You raise your hand by clicking on the little icon in the control pane. It looks like an upraised palm. With that, and without further ado, let me introduce Anup Bandavadekar, the India lead and passenger vehicles program lead for the ICCT. So, Anup.
Thank you, Joe. This is quite a good time for us to be talking about two and three wheelers in India. For those of you who attended previous webinars in our India webinar series, the first webinar in April, we talked about generic issues of vehicle emission standards. And then the second webinar in May, we talked about fuel quality improvement issues related to India. Given the prominence of two-wheelers and three-wheelers in Indian context, we have been working with Mr. Iyer for a little over a year now on actually evaluating the technical issues associated with two-wheelers and three-wheelers, both efficiency as well as emission reduction. Mr. Iyer, as many of you probably know already, has been working in this field for a very long time, both from the fuel side as well as from the vehicle side, with a very distinguished career. So it's been a great experience working with Mr. Iyer, and I'm hoping that many of you will have a chance to look at the report, which I think is a state-of-the-art in terms of emissions and efficiency issues for these types of vehicles, whether in India or outside. So, Mr. Iyer, please take on the presentation.
Thank you very much, Anup, for the nice introduction and also informing the audience about the importance of this particular subject. As most of you know, perhaps those who know India very well, that Indian cities are full of two-wheelers and three-wheelers. That's because that's a very primary mode of transport, personal transport in India. Generally, there's a lack of public transport in most of the cities. People tend to switch to two-wheelers, and some of them for intermediate public transport, like the auto rickshaws, use three-wheelers. What we have done in this project is to make an assessment from a technical point of view, the possibility of reducing emissions further, and also reducing the fuel consumption or improving the fuel efficiency. Now, the importance of two and three-wheelers sales growth is at double-digit rates in the last decade, and a three-wheelers it's crossed about 500,000. So you can imagine that if there's one car, there are 5 two-wheelers. It really underscores the importance of this mode of transport. And India has been having emission regulations, and there have been fairly stringent emission standards which the Indian vehicles have been meeting. Similarly, the Indian customer for two-wheelers is highly demanding of fuel efficiency, even though at the cost of performance. And that has made the industry produce vehicles which are highly fuel efficient. Given this scenario, one might think that, oh, we're doing very well, but no. In the extremely large numbers would again add up to fairly large contributions by this mode of transport. And hence there is a kind of urgency of the whole affair of trying to further introduce more stringent standards and also possibly introduce some fuel efficiency goals. There have been three main types of two-wheelers in India: scooters, motorcycles, and mopeds. Now, till the beginning of the year 2000 decade, scooters were the prominent mode of transport because highly preferred kind of vehicle. Whereas from that point onwards, with certain changes in the industrial setup and government policies, fuel-efficient motorcycles started coming in. And as you can see in the graph in front of you, that from that year onwards, motorcycles have simply taken off and leaving scooters and mopeds behind. In the very recent years, we see a certain amount of increase in the scooter sales, but then the motorcycles are way above them. So in this context, what are we talking about in this webinar briefly? What are the engine and after treatment technologies used to meet the BS3 standards, which is called the Bharat Stage 3 standards in India? Proposals for a 10-year roadmap of progressively stricter emission standards, we call them for our use BS4 and BS5. Let me mention here that the current standards of BS3 have been as a result of a roadmap that was drawn up by a very powerful committee headed by Dr. Mashelkar, and it's a very famously known report. But then there has been nothing after that. What happens after 2010 is the big question. So we want to try to fill that knowledge gap. We also looked at what are the known, potential, and emerging technologies to reduce emissions. There are certain recommendations, certain areas of technical measures which other than emission standards, which have been sadly neglected in India so far, but have great potential to bring about reduction in emissions. And lastly, we also look at the current fuel consumption profile. As I said, it's already pretty fuel efficient, but what is actual numbers like? The technological potential to achieve further reduction. Here we see that, for example, the progression of 2 and 3-wheeler emission standards for 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers. 1991 was the year beginning, with practically no standard at that point of time. The government in India has come down very severely with very stringent standards, 1 gram per kilometer for each pollutant in the current level, and 1.25 for 3-wheelers, which is very stringent by world standards. I've summarized this a little more detailed. You will note one thing, that whether it's a 2-stroke or a 4-stroke, and irrespective of the size or capacity or maximum speed or CC, the norm, the standard is the same in India. So you'll see the first line is 2 and 4, all 2-wheelers. In 2010 on, it's 1 gram, 1 gram. There is a durability requirement of 30,000, which instead of showing 30,000 kilometer durability or demonstrating, one could also use a 1.2 deterioration factor. So like this, you have got for spark ignition 3-wheelers and compression ignition 2 and 3-wheelers, which has also got a standard for particulate matter. Now this is as per what has been existing in the Indian norms so far. But in the footnote below, you will find that alternative standards as per the UNECE Global Technical Regulation GTR2, they have been notified. Actually, it came as a draft, and now it has been notified in June 2012. Now the GTR2, I'll give you a little more details. So it says defines certain new classification of vehicles and a new drive cycle called the World Motorcycle Test Cycle, the WMTC. Here you will find, for example, the top half of the table shows the 4 kind of classes, class 1 and 2.1, class 2.2, 3.1, 3.2. Below the table, you will find that what do these classes mean actually. So you will find that they are defined in terms of the maximum speed and the CC. So these are the 2 criteria, and the limit values are different for each one of these categories. Whereas the Indian current engine regulation is the same everywhere. So you find that these are like 1.87, 1.08 for C1 HC plus NOx, and then for other classes it's a little higher. The larger the vehicle, the little more relaxed the number is. And what the Indian authorities have introduced are they includes the DF, that means the deterioration factor. Now, I must also mention here that all this has been done back as an alternative by the Indian government following India's commitment to transpose GTR2 into the country's regulations. This is one of the requirements of the United Nations ECE, that if you are a contracting party, if you participate in the development of the regulations, then you must bring those regulations into your own country in a reasonable period of time. Let's look at quickly at the technologies which are being used currently. There may be a variety of technologies depending upon the vehicle manufacturer, the original vehicle design. I have broadly classified them into 2 and 3 wheelers 2-stroke, 2 and 3 wheelers 4-stroke, and 3 wheelers 4-stroke compression regulation. So in the 2 and 3 wheelers 2-stroke, I first tell you that most of the 2 wheelers are now powered by 4-stroke engines, barring about 6%, which are basically mopeds, which have yet to switch over to 4-stroke. They are still 2-stroke for various technical reasons. And most of these models use engine optimization as a technique for meeting the standards of the with an oxidation catalytic converter. Then there is one 3-wheeler, which is the spark ignition 4-stroke engine, which is a 2-stroke engine, which has been equipped with GDI. In case of 2 3-wheelers 4-stroke SI engines, most models, again, engine optimization is the main theme. Some variable ignition timing, some of them may use oxidation catalytic converters. And secondary air injection used by some high-end models may be even having port fuel injection. I'll be explaining that a little later, with oxidation catalytic converter or 3-way catalytic converter. In case of compression ignition engines, most models again use optimization of injection parameters and calibrating the whole engine system to low emissions. Most of the models are direct injection models, because that are known to be producing less emissions and better fuel efficiency. Look at the stringency of the GTR2 limits which have been adopted by India as an alternative. Now, the UNEC in their deliberations have identified 4 areas because of which standards have to be different. So they defined 3 different levels of standards, which may be due to traffic situation or combined limits for some reason. Different reference fuels may be there in different markets. Environmental priorities like energy fuel conservation, cost benefit situation. Now, so the emission limits adopted in India are among the least stringent, and they have been developed based on a correlation studies of the IDC, the Internal Indian Driving Cycle results, and the WMTC. And the limits in India continue to be combined for HC and NOx. For example, this table now shows you the 3 alternative levels of performance, A, B, and C. It is A which has been adopted by India, and if you see the numbers, or maybe when you have more time, you can study in more detail, find that generally the Indian standards are a little less stringent than the others. Europe, for example, have adopted a more tighter limit. Now, with this basic information, we decided that how do we go about developing a roadmap? How do we say what kind of reduction in emissions has to be there? Ideally, of course, one should go by the air quality situation, monitoring it, finding out source apportionment, finding out who is contributing how much reduction is desired, and so on and so forth. Now, all that is fine, but then there has to be some progress, some movement in that direction if you do not have answers to all those questions. So we have taken that approach. We think that what is applicable in European countries may be broadly applicable to the Indian situation also. So what we have done, we have 4 steps we have taken. First, the GTR2 alternative is the base, not the original BS3 with IDC. It is WMTC. So that's one change that we bring about. It no longer be an alternative. Then take the proposed the European Union limit values for vehicles and different classes. Now, based on the basic classification done by the UNECE, EU has got a large number of classifications. We find that where do the Indian vehicles fit into the European classification? For example, L3E is a class with A1, A2, A3, 3 different performance levels. All our Indian vehicles of currently produced models and preferred by the market fall into these 3 categories. So we only have to look at limits specified for those categories. Determine the % reduction of the EU limit values from, say, they have planned from Euro 3 to Euro 4 by 2015, from Euro 4 to Euro 5 in 2018. So what is the percentage reduction they have brought about? And apply the same percent reduction by and large, more or less, to the basic Indian GTR2 limit for determining the limit values for BS4 and BS5. This table is summarized, for example, what is happening in Europe, Euro 3, 4, and 5 for two classes, PIV max for that particular class, which is what the Indian vehicles fall into. You will find that under each pollutant title at the top, there is a percentage reduction column. Find that between Euro 3 and Euro 4, by and large, about 25% reduction has been proposed by European Union. And from Euro 4 to Euro 5, it has been more stringent. It's nearly about 40%, a little more than 40%. So what we have done is we have used this similar percentage reduction and applied them to the basic GTR2 alternative limits for those classes of vehicles, and given the new proposals for 2010, 2015, 2020. But we have retained HC plus NOx. There is a good reason for this, because the Indian industry has a very strong view on this. And the basic reason is most of the vehicles have now become 4-stroke, as I mentioned. Now, 4-strokes tend to have a higher level of NOx emissions compared to hydrocarbon emissions. And because they are very fuel efficient, they tend to use very lean air-fuel ratios and produce a little more of NOx. But their hydrocarbon levels are very low, and they can be further reduced by using after-treatment systems. So making it HC plus NOx is actually beneficial from the fuel efficiency point of view. So that's why we decided to retain this. Otherwise, it would be very, very difficult to justify. And the table, the lower part of the table, we have developed the 3-wheeler emission standards or covering the ignition vehicle standards using similar proportionality, similar reduction in emissions. But these are not covered by the GTR2. Now, having defined the certain limits, like 2015 and 2020, BS4 and BS5 respectively, we just wanted to look at, is it possible to meet those standards, and what are the known technology routes and what are the potential technology routes to meet these standards. So if you look at 2015 known standards, so most models will use perhaps improved oxidation catalytic converters for 2 strokes. Air-assisted direct injection and improved oxidation catalytic converters could be a choice made by some. And some models may use electronic carburetor with oxidation catalytic converter. In case of 4 strokes, again, further engine optimization, things like variable ignition timing could be used. But there could be a lot of emphasis on catalytic converters, like improved catalytic converters, close coupled catalytic converters, startup catalysts, quick warm-up catalysts, exhaust insulation, and so on. Some of the models may still go to port fuel injection, and some may choose electronic carburetor. So these are the potential known routes of technologies. In case of 2020, the potential technologies are all 4-stroke. Many of the 4-stroke, 2-stroke may get replaced with 4-stroke. And some models may go for, again, more and more models may go for air-assisted direct injection. And some models, electronic carburetor, which is appearing as a cheap solution. I just wanted to inform you that just a couple of days ago, when I was in correspondence with a researcher in the Technical University Graz, they mentioned to me that they have done a considerable amount of research on low pressure direct injection in 2-stroke engines, and have got improvements to the tune of 30 to 40% in fuel efficiency and emissions. And in case of 4 strokes for the 2020, we feel that most of the models will perhaps adopt for port fuel injection and please oxidation catalytic converters. Some may go for closed loop systems, and some may go for three-way catalytic converters. Some high-end models may also introduce gasoline direct injection. So we feel that there are definitely route solutions available, but they are not ready to use tomorrow. They will need development, improvement, adaptation, fine-tuning. Cost is a very big factor. I have summarized the cost estimates for several of these technologies. I don't want to start reading all of them right now, but just want to give you, there are 2 different sources of information I have used. One is Mesler report, so again with the ICCT, and there's a Winkler paper. Now, we find that in case of 2-stroke, the top half of the table, the costs range from $34 to $42 US for the changeover. There are simple systems like oxidation catalyst, secondary pulse air injection, and so on. And two-stroke air-assisted direct injection is only 42. Whereas in case of the four-stroke secondary air systems, and you go to the bottom, four-stroke fuel injection without catalyst is 111 USD, and four-stroke fuel injection with catalyst is 160. It's a large amount. Now there is a need to reduce these costs, and a lot of work is being done to reduce the costs. The basic issue there is the volumes. Whenever we talk to the people who are dealing with fuel injection systems, they say that the biggest problem is volumes. So they are forced to use components which are basically designed for four-wheelers, and they don't need to perform so many functions. But it's not economical to redesign them optimally to meet with smaller number of functions so that the cost is reduced unless there is an assurance of volume offtake. So that's a catch-22 situation there. I have tried to summarize some of these results, and then some direct feedbacks were given to me by some experts in the field. Now I feel that four-stroke fuel injection without catalyst could be available at about 85 US. Now the potential measures to reduce for diesels, let's have a quick look at them, but there isn't much of a scope excepting, as I said, the optimization, switching over completely to the indirect direct injection system. And the only technology which seems to be possible to be pursued in case of small below 500cc diesel engines, mostly single cylinder, is to go for high-speed direct injection HSDI kind of system. So no one has tried it so far. This is only a suggestion from my side. We need to explore more other solutions like changing ignition timing or more optimization, combustion, friction reduction, etc. Now, let me quickly go through the list of measures which are not tailpipe emission requirements. But as I mentioned in the very beginning, they have been unfortunately not given enough attention in India, but which have great potential to reduce the contribution of two-wheelers and three-wheelers to the air quality. Evaporative emissions has been struggling for many years now. 2 grams per test is a universally used standard, achievable technology available. And there is no need, in our opinion, to wait to introduce this standard. Only a reasonable amount of lead time would be required. Durability requirements, we have been having this 30,000 kilometer durability. I'm not talking about the deterioration factor, that's a separate issue. That is instead of 30,000, but we are talking about that the very level of 30,000 should be enhanced to 50,000. We have had this 30,000 for 10 years now. And definitely things have improved. The engine out emissions from the basic engine have reduced. Catalytic converters have improved in terms of their life also. It should certainly be possible, and it's necessary to look at this. The biggest problem here is, for example, an auto rickshaw, a three-wheeler with a catalytic converter with a two-stroke engine. It covers 30,000 kilometers in 1 year maybe, because that's a heavy utilization. So what does this man do? Then he keeps his vehicle emitting huge quantities of pollutants without anyone checking it. So that we want to avoid. So we want to go for a more reasonably optimized kind of durability requirement. Periodic vehicle inspection, those who are familiar with India would know it is actually the PUC, as they call it, pollution under control. This whole system needs to be revamping. It's a common problem for the entire automobile sector. For two-wheelers, we have identified that a loaded mode test of a very simple construction, very simple equipment developed by ARAI, Automotive Research Association of India, and has been languishing in their laboratories for many years. That should be taken out and pursued as a good substitute for the simple idling test, so that we at least have a greater amount of meaning that can be attached to the test periodic vehicle inspection. The higher cost, etc., which may arise out of that could be compensated for by reducing the frequency or increasing the charges. But we feel very strongly that this should be pursued. We've got the next two items which are slightly futuristic, the in-use conformity testing. We have got, Taiwan has already got an in-use conformity testing which they call as the life cycle emission control program. And they do say vehicle selective enforcement audit and recall programs. They have introduced it and they're working quite successfully. So my suggestion here is that we look at that and then adapt it to make a beginning with it. At least start with some, say, three-wheelers in this system. And this might help also in introducing similar systems for four-wheelers. As far as onboard diagnostics are concerned, it is related to the possibility of using electronic engine management. You can't have easily and onboard diagnostic systems which has got carburetors as simple carburetors as the main equipment. So, but then we feel that this should be attended to because it go a very long way in ensuring that the in-use vehicles are in good condition. Now I'll quickly run through the fuel efficiency part of the presentation. The general profile of the fuel efficiency of, I mentioned to you earlier that this was very fuel efficient vehicles. Now we have picked up only three categories of vehicles: motorcycles between 75 to 125 cc and those between 125 and 250. 75 to 125 cc occupies the major part of the motorcycle population, production, sales, etc. And you will find that that is the most fuel efficient. The maximum can be as high as 81 kilometer to a liter, but the average is about say 68. And this is true. I mean, there are many actual users report this kind of fuel efficiency. The motorcycle, next category of motorcycles, of course, it depresses. It's for obvious reasons. But scooters are little less fuel efficient, but they are preferred for various other functional reasons. The data that we have given here is what is reported here is like the bottom you will see is the Bike India magazine. They regularly conduct tests on all the new models that come up in the market, and they have standard systems and fairly reliable method of gauging. So we have picked up this data from there for all kinds of vehicles that are available and then summarized them. Now fuel efficiency standards are there in China and in Taiwan. We just reproduced here the Chinese standards. They are based on the CC classification, simple classification, and limits in terms of liters per 100 kilometer. What we are trying to do is we try to compare the reported values of Indian vehicles, which we found from magazines, and the China limit. China limit is given at the right extreme. We find that the China limit actually is the efficiency, fuel efficiency norm is based on two tests, results of two tests which are made together. One is a kind of a driving cycle test, and the other is a constant speed test. Both are done on chassis dynamometer, and the result of each one of them in some proportion is taken to say that this is the fuel efficiency. Whereas the results that we have used are the reported, that is reported by the Bike in magazine, which are based on actual running on the road in 2-3 different types of conditions: city, congested condition, highway, and rural. So they take a composite overall view of that. So this is more representative of what is actually happening to the customer, whereas the China limit is a little stretched away from it. This is only to give you an idea about how important it is to specify right type of test procedures, etc., when we talk about giving fuel efficiency standards. Fuel consumption reductions were achievable. How many types of systems are available is the next slide. We have taken air-assisted fuel injection used in 2-stroke engines, then direct injection used in 4-stroke engines, and port fuel injection used in 4-stroke engines. What I have done is I have summarized a lot of literature data on this. Also taken views of the experts like Layton or Archer and so on. Now you will find that in case of the 2-stroke engines, air-assisted fuel injection, tremendous improvement is possible in fuel efficiency, 25 to even as high as 50. Whereas the instead of gasoline direct injection GDI, it is little less, but that's 4-stroke. For 4-stroke, this is a fairly good number. In the next slide, if you see that the first three, these are actually port fuel injection in 4-stroke engines. Most likely technology, as I had mentioned in the earlier time. So if you see the first three, Hero, Honda, Glamour, TVS, and HMSI, which are results which are taken from the actual road tests of the magazines, you find that really 10% improvement in fuel efficiency has been found. How we found this is that we know this particular model, the other specifications, that it is the same and it's a fuel injected version. So we have taken those comparisons and worked this out. This may not be claimed by the manufacturers. This is only to give an idea that it has potential. Even though it's 4-stroke, you changing over to port fuel injection would give you kind of benefit. And there are others which are varying, like right from 2% to 20%. So I think each one has to be looked at in its own merit. For fuel efficiency standards, as I said, some methodology has to be evolved. Post 4-wheelers, already the government has introduced certain fuel efficiency standards, and the industry has on its own started a voluntary declaration so that the customer can make an informed choice at the time of buying a vehicle. So that's all. The situation is there, but we need to work it out. And it's going to be very challenging because wherever there are 4 strokes, already very fuel efficient. I just summarize now that what we have seen in this during the presentation is that when you need a roadmap for 2 and 3 wheelers, the progression of mass emission standards similar to EU and GTR2, suitable technological solutions seem to be available. Then introducing evaporative emission limit of 2 gram per day without delay. Then other technical measures like durability enhancement, periodic vehicle inspection improvement, loaded mode test, introducing loaded mode test, in-use vehicle compliance, and onboard diagnostics are measures that one needs to look at with great care. Then introducing standards to achieve fuel efficiencies even better than the already superior levels by the world standards. And we also tried to put a little timeline onto this. We have just put 2 blocks of time, 2015 and 2020. Of course, the actual introductions can be in between, but because it's a roadmap, we said that most of these improvements can be or should be preferably introduced by the year 2015. And the major one, of course, being the BS4 using GTR cycle. And by 2020, the BS5 kind of emission limits. So that is all that I have to say at the moment. Thank you very much. Hello.
Thank you, Mr. Iyer. Oops, there's a little of the audio problem that I mentioned at the beginning. Thanks for that presentation, Mr. Iyer. As I said at the outset, we have plenty of time now for questions, about a half an hour from our scheduled hour anyway.
Yes.
If anyone has a question they would like to ask via the audio, I see that a couple of people have asked questions via the question pane earlier. Just raise your hand. Use that little icon with that looks like a outward-facing palm, and that will allow me or Francisco to call on you, quote unquote, so that and unmute you so that you can ask a question via the microphone so that everyone can hear. I see one question from Pundir. Please go ahead. Please go ahead. I see a question from Pundir.
Professor Pundir, your mic is on, so you could ask your question.
Okay, we seem maybe we've lost. Pundir?
Yeah, I think we can move on to the next question and then come back to Professor Pundir if he's still on the line.
Great. I'm going to mute that microphone. There we go. Here's a question from Aditya Makaria. Please go ahead. Your microphone is on. The question from Aditya Makaria.
Hi, Joe.
Yeah.
I believe I can transfer the question from Aditya.
Yeah.
The question is, will two-wheelers need to have multi-point fuel injection when the next emission standards are introduced in India?
Oh, I see. Okay, so there's some
technical question for Mr. Iyer.
Sorry, can you just reframe the question for me?
The question is, will two-wheelers need to have multi-point fuel injection or port fuel injection when the next emission standards are introduced in India?
Whether we need it. Now, as I mentioned in my presentation, that that would be a distinct possibility, but not for the next one, but the one after that. The next one, some vehicles may go for that, but the one after that, 2020, I think there will be a fairly large number of vehicles I can foresee will be equipped with post-fuel injection.
Thank you, Mr. Dyer. There is another question from Mr. Sunil Patak. It says, it seems that direct injection is the future solution. What about ultrafine particle emissions from GDI?
No, actually, we have absolutely no information on this. One vehicle which has been introduced with the GDI that has been done by one company making three-wheelers, and is announced in the paper. So it's actually no more details are available in the public domain. It only talks about the fuel efficiency improvement that is achieved because of going over to GDI. No information available except from literature, which I think anyone of us can access. The broad general literature, I mean. No
Yes,
specific answer to your question.
As an additional note, information about particle emissions from GDI is a field that is just starting to grow, and a few research organizations are taking on this type of questions, trying to evaluate and quantify what is the particle emissions by mass and by number from GDI vehicles. So this is a really, really new field.
Okay, that's fine. Actually, it's more a problem which is, like for the four-wheelers where GDI has become far more common. For two and three-wheelers, this is perhaps still in a nascent stage. So whatever new knowledge is obtained from four-wheelers will become applicable to three-wheelers also.
I see a couple of more questions in the question pane, but then also Akshay Mani has a hand up. So let me turn that microphone on. And you go ahead and ask that question.
Hi, this is Akshay from Embark India in Mumbai. Hi, Mr. Iyer. One of the questions I had was based on the projected direction of emission standards and fuel efficiency. What do we foresee in terms of the relative growth of whether four-stroke engines would be preferred, or whether the industry would move towards a two-stroke direct injection? Can we say with some level of assurance that one instead of the other would be preferred, or it's still not clear whether the industry would move towards a four-stroke or a two-stroke direct injection?
Yeah, actually, it's a very difficult question to answer, but very interesting at the same time. I wish I had an answer to this question, but let me attempt looking through the crystal ball. Most of the motorcycles are already converted to four-stroke. So obviously, they will keep looking for solutions which are primarily applied on four-stroke, and as long as they can achieve the reduction required by incremental improvements, changes, I think they would prefer that route purely from an economic reason. Whereas in case of those who are using two-stroke due to other compulsions, you are familiar with the three-wheeler situation in India, where most of the auto rickshaws are still powered by, 70% of them are powered by two-stroke engines. Now, they may be more interested in looking for the injection type of two-stroke engine, which is showing very great potential as a replacement for the existing two-stroke, rather than change over to four-stroke. Because the two-stroke direct injection is seen to be overcoming practically most of the problems. So scavenging is one big problem with two-stroke engines, which direct injection overcomes completely. The only problem that remains is that of particulate matter, but there are indications from the literature that it will be able to meet the standards, if any, for gasoline engines, spark ignition engines. So that's all I can say at the moment. It's a question of cost and incremental cost, and what the manufacturers can afford to put in and what the customer is ready to pay, and the stringency of the emission standards. But the emission standards were to become technologically forcing standards, now something which cannot be easily achieved by conventional four-stroke through incremental improvements or only by adopting port fuel injection. They may have to look at other options. So then the two-stroke with direct injection, not in the current form, but maybe in more evolved form, may become a candidate. It's got many other advantages. Its basic advantages of improved power to weight ratio, simplicity, fewer parts for maintenance, etc., etc. Two-stroke still has those advantages. So there may be options open in that way.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, welcome.
Okay, I see a question from Alan Lloyd. Dr. Lloyd, your microphone is on.
Thank you, Mr. Iyer, for a very nice presentation. Given as you are tightening emission standards from the tailpipe, the evaporative emissions, at least for hydrocarbon, become more important. Why are you not suggesting a reduction in the emission standards for evaporative testing in future years?
I thought we should first make a beginning. So this 2 gram per test has been used there for many four-wheelers and also for the two-wheelers which are there in Thailand and Taiwan, as I mentioned. When the subject of introducing the evaporative emission standards for two-wheelers was initially taken up by the government many years ago, at that point of time I was also an active member of the industry. I can tell you that some genuine difficulties were put forth compared to four-wheelers. The two-wheelers have got their tanks open because they are above the carburetor. Generally, you've got four-wheelers, you've got the tank at the lower level, and you've got a pump which takes the fuel onto the fuel supply system. So you've got a closed kind of system where it's possible to fit the canister and do the operations that need to be done during that evaporative emission process. Whereas in case of two-wheelers with open kind of systems, there used to be difficulties. So I mean, I'm not in a position to describe to you precisely, but suddenly flooding of the carburetors would be a kind of problem that would come up. Now, I believe that they have been overcome. The problems have been overcome and solutions have been found. But then I thought that it would be prudent to start with a known number which has been adopted and tried by other people also, rather than ask for tightening up. I agree with you that once 2 gram has been introduced and some experience gained, I think we can always think of go for tightening standards the next round, like in 2020 kind of situation. I hope that answers your question, Dr. Lloyd.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I see a couple of questions from George Price and Sunil Pathak, but before that, a question that came through the question pane from Chris Cost. For three-wheelers in India, which fuel is preferred from an emission standpoint? Petrol, LPG, or CNG, Mr. Iyer?
Oh, sorry, for what is preferred? Can you just repeat if you don't mind?
For three-wheelers, this is a question from Chris Cost. And the question is, for three-wheelers in India, which fuel is preferred from an emission standpoint? Petrol, LPG, or CNG?
I think it's CNG. And because it's proved to be the clearest of them. And followed by LPG, and then followed by petrol. That's the sequence that I would put it in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I see a hand up from George Price. Mr. Price, your microphone is on. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Very nice presentation this morning or this evening. I was just curious how the lower sulfur content issues impact this whole study, and if indeed they do, or maybe make it more general, how does the quality of the fuels impact us?
Okay, thank you for the question. Now, I've not covered anything on that aspect here because that would make the presentation too long. But I have touched upon this issue in the report that Anup mentioned in the morning. What we broadly find is that the technological improvements and the devices, etc., which are used in the engines of 2 and 3 wheelers are actually they're not so sensitive to the fuel quality, including sulfur content. So what has been decided to do is the industry has taken a view that it just piggyback on the 4-wheeler fuel quality requirements. That is, there is nothing worse than what can happen with the 4-wheelers. 4-wheelers, possible to take care of it. It can be done in case of 2-wheelers, but 2-wheelers are not demanding any special fuel quality, nor does it exist, in my opinion. Its requirements technically are the same. One of the biggest problems with sulfur content in case of 4-wheelers, which use the closed loop emission control system, the TWC with closed loop, I think there the oxygen sensor is very susceptible to damage due to sulfur content. Whereas there is no such thing in existence in 2 and 3-wheelers at the moment. It might come up some point of time, in which case there would already be a supply of low sulfur fuel or extra low sulfur fuel to supply to 4-wheelers, so it should be available to 2-wheelers also. So that's the general view we are taking. Although some details I have tried to give in specification by specification, what is the impact in my report.
Okay, thank you. And just personally, do you see the standards effectively changing? I see in the report the annual emissions and low sulfur scenarios for going through 2030. Are those realistic? Are you seeing that actually happening, or is there, what is the status of that low sulfur fuel scenario?
I'm sorry, I won't be able to answer because it is something with an area which I have not touched upon.
I see. Okay, good.
Whether it's making an impact or not, there are reports and studies that are available on what is the impact these measures have had, and what further measures are to be taken, and what impact would be expected out of them. I think very detailed studies have been conducted by certain agencies in India. They are available on the Central Pollution Control Board website. One can perhaps see what is the impact of this sulfur. India has not yet gone to the very low level of sulfur. And that's the next stage that has to come up for 4-wheelers.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Good. There's a question from Sunil Pathak. Please go ahead. Sunil Pathak, please go ahead. Your microphone is on. Sunil may have stepped away from the computer.
Are there any questions, or should be done with the questions that are appearing in the chat window?
I think we've covered most of those.
I think there is what percentage of current 2 and 3-wheeler on-road population is 2-stroke and 4-stroke as on today? Should I try and answer this?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Now, the on-road population is really difficult to find out because there is no data available in India on the vehicle obsolescence, like the scrapping away of the vehicle, the lifetime of the vehicle. And there's a tendency to keep on with the old vehicles for a longer time than in other countries. So population data, very little is available. You can calculate it by making certain assumptions of attrition rates every year, and then say this is the population. I don't think much has been tried on this, but I would guess that about 30% of the vehicles may still be two-stroke, considering that there are still a number of mopeds and some of the old scooters are still running on the road, maybe. But this is the guesswork. I have no data on this. And your next question is, almost mopeds sold today in India are two-stroke. Mopeds continue to have a relatively small but significant market share. So this looks like a statement. Is there any question attached to it? Because I have said that 6% is the approximate estimate of represent volumes. Then we have got what percent of current 2 and 3 wheeler on-road population is two-stroke and four-stroke as on today. Say answer is the same as what I think the second question is the same. Your next one is what is GTR2? GTR2 stands for Global Technical Regulation number 2. This is a set of regulations that are being developed by the United Nations ECE with a view to break the technical barriers to trade between various countries. So there are different countries having different types of barriers which they raise to protect their domestic industry or to favor particular countries. So all that should be broken up. So there should be one uniform standard, uniform test method throughout the world. That's the dream. And a lot of subjects have been taken up by the UNECE. It's called WP29, which is doing all this work regularly. Participating countries are there. They take a view, views of experts. They carry out special studies if required. And one of the biggest and most important regulations that has come up is this GTR2, which is meant for two-wheeler emissions and test procedures. I hope that answers the question. Then we addresses the status of the standards and test procedures under the technical regulation UNECE. I think the second part is the same. What procedure will enhance durability tests follow? Enhance durability test follow. Actually, there is durability is one of the main issues with in-use emissions from 2 and 3 wheelers. Most regulations around the globe, including Europe and India, lack the proper regulatory requirements and tests to ensure durability close to full vehicle useful life. Europe is currently studying the possibility of new tests for durability. Please check for durability of pollution control measures for L category vehicles from Fuelden et al. At 2000. This is a topic that need to be improved. I think I fully agree with you, Francisco, on this issue that there are a lot of big question marks and there are a lot of resistance on the manufacturers to subject their vehicles to this kind of tests. And they have got this truncated test and then extrapolated results and so on. All those methods have been tried out so that the durability test can be completed in a less time. But then there are very big question marks on this, and I don't know how. Maybe what in case of catalytic converters, they do some accelerated aging test. Whether any such thing can be adopted, I don't know. I mean, this is a big question mark. I will look at the papers that you have mentioned. In this audience question, does two-wheelers have catalytic converters? Yes, I think if my presentation I did say that they do use catalytic converters. And since 2001, you already answered the question. I think that takes care of the questions in the chat window, Francisco.
Yes, and it seems Sunil is back with us. So a question from Sunil. Sunil, yes. Your microphone is now on. Please go ahead. Sunil Pathak. Seem to be having some audio difficulties. Sunil, your microphone is on. If you... Okay, well...
Well, if not, I think we are close to the conclusion of this webinar. So, Joe, if you would like to close.
Very good. Well, let me just say nothing more than thanks to all of you for attending, to Anup and Francisco for helping to run this, and of course to Mr. Iyer primarily for an excellent presentation. We will be posting the slides. There's been one question of whether we could see the slides again, but we'll be posting that on our website at www.theicct.org/India. And we should have an audio recording, audio and video recording of the webinar available as well. all goes well. And please stay tuned. Keep an eye out for further communications from us as we pick up with our webinar series on India. Thanks again to all of you. Until next time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. So, bye to all. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to everyone, Anup and Francisco and Joe and all the team for constantly standing by me and they helping me out with putting this webinar through. And I hope it has been of some use to ICCT and all the audience who joined in the webinar. And I'll continue to be happy to receive any further questions in the written format. I'll be happy to answer them. So thanks to ICCT for giving me an opportunity to work on the project and also to present this webinar. Thank you very much.
Very good. And with that, we've come to a close.
Yeah.
You all.
Okay. Bye and have a nice day, all of you.